The Rwanda plan is as dead as Suella Braverman's career as Home Secretary, and it's time for the government to move on. The bottom line with this is it was never going to work. I said that at the time, I've said it throughout, and I'm saying it again when the Supreme Court has also basically agreed. Tens of thousands of people are crossing the channel illegally every year. When they get here, they enter a broken and chaotic system beset by chronic, unforgivably large backlogs. Sending a tiny handful of people to Rwanda at vast public expense was never either practical or a humane solution. Now the Supreme Court has reiterated that it's illegal. Genuine asylum seekers would face the serious risk of ending up back in the country they escaped from. So far, the government has given £140 million of our money to Rwanda in exchange for precisely nothing. So it's all an embarrassing fiasco for Rishi Sunak, his government and the country. And the only person benefiting from all that is Sir Keir Starmer.
His Rwanda scheme, cooked up with his National Security Threat Home Secretary, has blown up. He was told over and over again that this would happen, that it wouldn't work, and it was just the latest Tory gimmick. But he bet everything on it, and now he's totally exposed. The central pillar of his government has crumbled beneath him. Does he want...
Well, plenty of people are lining up to argue that this is some kind of affront to democracy. Newspaper columnist, I think that's what he is now, Boris Johnson, called it a legal blockade on Rwanda, which is obviously absurd. Now some Conservatives are clamouring for the UK to exit the European Convention on Human Rights or just ignore the Supreme Court altogether. Yes, Lee Anderson, who's at the moment the Deputy Chairman of the Conservative Party, the party of law and order, called on the Prime Minister to brazenly break the law and put planes in the air now. That's exactly the kind of careless, brainless and heartless thinking that got us into this mess. But you can see more of that on GB News when Mr Anderson has a show. The UK does have a migrant crisis. The numbers speak for themselves. Rwanda, though, is always a distraction, not a solution. Now it's time for the government to put its time and money into finding an actual solution that works. Well, with me in the studio is TalkTV's international editor, Isabel Oakeshott, associate editor of The Mirror, Kevin Maguire, and TalkTV contributor, Esther Cracker. Welcome to all of you. All right, Isabel. It's dead as a doornail. It's pushing up the daisies. It's an ex-parrot, this deal.
It is a complete ex-parrot. It should never have been a parrot in the first place. I mean, gimmicks would work if it's a symbolic thing that you can actually make happen, but it was blindingly obvious from the start that there were never going to be a lot of deportations to Rwanda. You didn't need to go through this agonising and incredibly expensive and time-wasting process to tell us that. And, you know, hats off to Rishi Sunak for attempting to make it look like he had a plan, you know, that he was seizing the initiative, that he was not to be deterred by this Supreme Court because big wows were going to come up with some emergency legislation, which will then itself be challenged again and again.
Well, they haven't got time. I mean, Esther, here's the point. There's a ticking clock, right? He's only got a year till he has to call an election. They're never going to get what they need to do to even get this back on the table in time. So this is dead for this government anyway. What do you make of this? I mean, the problem is, at the root of this is a real problem.
Well, of course.
You know, the small boats issue is not something that is a small problem.
Well,
it's something that enrages the British public, that tens of thousands of people come in here illegally, brought here by unscrupulous, greedy smugglers who don't care if the people they bring over live or die. It's a humanitarian crisis in that regard. It's a ridiculous farce that our country's border is so transparently porous they keep wanting to pour in. And at the root of it is a system that just doesn't work. 30,000 people on the asylum backlog. Why can't we just do the basics?
It's way more than that,
like what? Just
is it? How many?
Turn them away.
It's 130,000 plus.
130,000.
I mean, that's the population of
130,000 people on the waiting list, right? I mean, this is ridiculous for a country like ours.
Well, of course, but the question is, what exactly is the government supposed to do about that? You can't turn them back.
I think you actually can.
Well, but they're not doing it. That's the point.
Yeah,
and this is the issue here. This is an existential crisis for the Conservative Party because it goes against every principle. It goes against law and order. It goes against fairness and meritocracy. At the end of the day, the amount of money we spend on these boat crossings is more than the budget for homelessness in the UK. It's incredible.
You two are both Conservatives, right? You identify as Conservatives. And yet you're both instinctively very hostile about this, which is
because the answer is simple. The answer is simple. Turn them away.
The majority of people who do get here on boats are granted the right to stay because they have a
shouldn't be.
legal right.
No, they don't.
The government is trying to use the channel as a moat. If you had safe and legal routes...
Don't talk over each other.
Do you know part of these migrants are Indian students coming from Serbia because Serbia has a visa-free waiver with Indians? They are not genuine asylum seekers. No, let's contextualise this. Since 2018, the population of Solihull have crossed the channel on
it's not
boats.
right.
That is a side.
We can all agree it's wrong, and clearly if 15,000 fewer people are coming because of the Albanian economic migrants coming over, then that clearly is a problem as well. But there will definitely be some legitimate asylum seekers and refugees who, by the way, have come from countries that we bombed. Right, so we have a moral duty to take care of them.
Well, we went there, they went there, they come here. It's a backhanded compliment. They want to come here, start a new life, work and pay their way.
You know who we have a moral duty to? The women and children that they're leaving behind. If they're in such a desperate situation.
Well, look, we can all agree it's an absolute horror story, right?
I'm not against it on principle, by the way, because I think that if we were actually able to do it, it would stop the flow of migrants. I'm against it because it was flawed from the start, because we were never going to get it.
How would you fix it?
We would never get it to happen.
If I've made you Home Secretary tomorrow, which, by the way, it might happen. We've had 6 in 6 years, so let's assume you're number 7.
I would be working with the Ministry of Defence to turn back the boats. Whatever the legal niceties, I would be turning back the boats. It's been done in other countries. Actually, Belgium is doing it. And once you start turning them back,
Kevin, why are you shaking your
will
head?
stop coming.
Right, because I remember Priti Patel said this, and the Royal Navy was deployed. But Royal Navy sailors are going to try and use their boat to push back a dinghy, knowing they'll capsize it and people have died.
The Australians have done this, and we've actually
deployed them.
The Australians have done this, and we've consulted
them.
Why can't we just do it?
The Australians, those boats are huge boats.
That doesn't make a difference. It's still a boat. It's on water.
You can tow them back.
If you're trying to do the Australian system here, it would be ruled quite rightly unlawful. Now, the Rwanda deal, it was cruel. It was cruel. It was unworkable. It was expensive. It's immoral.
The Australian thing, it worked brilliantly. There are no more boats coming over.
Do you know what happens in those camps that they send them? The levels of suicide and ill health.
Well, they
is that really what you want?
Excuse me.
Where's your humanity?
The suicides on the people.
Where is it?
The people heartlessly smuggling these individuals and taking money from them, not the governments defending their borders. I'm sorry. Look, that's what a country means. A country has borders.
By not having safe and legal routes for people to apply to come here. You are a business manager for the people smugglers. You are sending people to people smugglers.
How? By turning them away?
The majority of people, once they cross in those boats, are given a legal right to stay here.
That doesn't mean they should be.
Exactly. It means our system is broken.
Kevin, if you've actually looked at the criteria by which their cases are judged, they are ludicrous.
I think we could do ourselves a massive favour if we just started by processing the people faster. I mean, the first thing I would do if I was James Cleverly is massively increase the number of people processing these applications. So at the very least, you get that number right down.
They should be turned around within a week.
Yeah, exactly. What's the point of processing them for just letting more people in?
They allowed the backlog to go over 170,000. They are now putting more resources in it. It's come down to 130,000. Now,
But all this money we're spending at the moment on Rwanda, 150 million, put that into more processing.
Yeah, unfortunately, it appears we've paid it.
No, I know.
They're not going to give it back.
But we're going to keep, by the sound of it, we're going to keep spending money on this folly, right?
Well, exactly, which is madness. But do you know the difference between the EU acceptance rates for asylum seekers in the UK? 37% versus 77%. There's a reason why when in the safe country of France, they choose to risk coming here.
Let me ask you this, Isabel, how damaging... I mean, it's been a fascinating week for Rishi Sunak. He has to sack his Home Secretary, which I think was the right thing to do. I think she defied his authority, and you can't have that as Prime Minister, and she did it brazenly. Then he woke up this morning to quite good news, right, that he'd hit one of his 5 pledges. Inflation has halved.
Brilliant.
It's come down,
things are still going up. Let's just remember the cost of things
but
going up.
Down, it's going up everywhere, but it's come down a lot faster than was predicted. That's a tick in his pledge box, and yet he couldn't even celebrate that before this happened. So it's been a turbulent week for him.
I think it's catastrophic, actually. I think this is absolutely, as Esther said, this is existential. You know, I got the email, "Dear Isabel, have you checked out our promises?" from the Chancellor, saying, you know, great news, inflation has halved. Yeah, I've checked out your promises. One of the main ones was that you were going to stop the boats, and you have abjectly failed to do that.
Well, they
You've
are.
got
Well, hang
no
on.
plan.
I interviewed Rishi Sunak. He didn't say completely stop. He said he would stop this.
Yeah, she had "stop the boats" on his podium.
that was the slogan, but they have stopped a lot of the boats. I mean, that's in Ireland, wasn't it?
If you looked at the T&Cs, he was going to pass legislation to
It's
stop
not
it.
going to fly with
But he gave the impression he was going to stop the boats. There's no government. If Labour come in, they will not completely stop the boats, because even if you allow the people who are entitled to seek asylum in the UK to come through safe and legal routes, those who aren't allowed
All right, final question,
will still
Esther.
sail.
Does Rishi moving more to the centre-right and abandoning people like Suella Braverman on the more extremity of the right, is that going to be better for him at the election?
No, because what matters is him actually acting instead of, you know, moving whichever way he wants. At the end of the day...
he has acted.
Not really, though, because he hasn't stopped the boats. In as much as I agree with a lot of Suella Braverman, what she said, I think she's a very unskilled, untalented politician. I think she's very callous.
I think every time she opened her incendiary gob,
exactly,
she said something that made my skin crawl.
But the thing is, she's an amateur.
Homeless.
She's an amateur.
Well,
but the thing is,
they brought it on themselves, these people. It's a lifestyle choice.
She was way out of her depth, and the government is better without her.
You know what, it's why I have no
Sunak
sympathy, because she may be jobless, but that's a lifestyle choice.
Let's get her a tent.
Exactly.
All chip in.
Wouldn't that be ironic? Thank you to my back. Good to see you all.